Just 5 miles west of downtown is a place that's called Landscape Art Under Glass. Celebrating its 100th birthday this year, the Garfield Park Conservatory, with its ferns, palm trees, and cacti, is a jewel in the Chicago park system. A new book looks at the history of the park and its surroundings. The book is called Inspired by Nature, the Garfield Park Conservatory and Chicago's West Side. And one of the authors is here to talk with us. She's Julia Bachrach. She is historian of the Chicago Park District. And Julia, welcome to Chicago tonight.
Thank you.
First of all, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know there was an historian for the Chicago Park District.
You're kidding. You didn't know about me?
No, I didn't, but I'm happy.
So glad you found me.
Absolutely. In the book, you talk about the conservatory, but the conservatory is part of a larger story involving the park and the West Side.
Yes.
How do those three come together?
Well, my co-author, Joanne Nathan, and I had done a lot of research on Jens Jensen, but as we began looking at
the great
story,
landscape designer.
Right, yes, such an interesting character, too. And as we began looking into the story, we felt that the whole West Side has really been overlooked, and that it was fascinating in terms of the theme of nature and horticulture and people's interpretations of nature has woven through the entire history. And so we felt that it was important really to kind of look at it in a broader picture, and we also included interviews of people who've lived there in the past and people who still live in the community.
Well, speaking of pictures, let's start with one of the early pictures, and let's go to one where we see the very genesis of it. It looks like nothing. What are we looking at here?
That's the unimproved site of Garfield Park. The original designer's name was William LeBaron-Jenney, and he was an engineer and an architect and a landscape designer. And he said that the original site was so barren that there wasn't a single tree worthy of preservation.
It looks like a swamp. Is that what it was?
It was very swampy, so his engineering expertise helped a lot.
And then there's a picture of an early lagoon when the park was still called Central Park.
Right, and this was about a year or two after they finished it. They considered that the finished landscape.
It looks a lot better than the first one.
Right, exactly. Now at least you have the lagoon and some trees, but you get the idea that these are living works of art, and the landscape designer is always thinking about how will this look in 50 years, in 100 years.
Now there's a shot of the original building on the site. Tell me about this building.
Right. Well, one of the things that we thought was so fascinating was that when Jenney designed the park in 1870, he anticipated that there should be a conservatory there. And that's really early for a conservatory in a public park. So about 15 years later, they did build a conservatory, and you can see it was a very fanciful Victorian building.
Looks like a Victorian confection, somebody called it.
Right, exactly.
And how long did this building last?
Not too long. It was only there for probably less than 20 years. It was falling apart, and then when Jens Jensen took over, he felt that these kinds of conservatories that were very typical of the Victorian era were pretentious buildings, and he wanted to do something completely different.
Well, let's go to Jens Jensen. And the park and the conservatory were really reimagined by landscape architect Jens Jensen. Tell us, what did he do that was so revolutionary?
Jensen was...
Is this him on this bike?
That is Jensen with his wife. They ran away to America because the family didn't approve of the marriage. They were from Denmark.
His family didn't approve of her,
Of her,
I understand.
right, yes. They thought she was from a lower, station in life. And so they ran away to America, and after a couple of years arrived in Chicago, and he began as a laborer for the West Park Commission and worked his way up the park system. And unlike most Chicagoans and probably most Americans at that time, he looked around and saw the natural prairie and thought that it was really quite exquisite. And so it really became the inspiration for his life's work, and he created a whole new style of landscape architecture, and he also was the father of the conservation movement in the Midwest.
At this point, his name, he's revered, he's thought of in those terms, and yet at one point he was forced out. What was going on?
They called him the graft-fighting Dane.
The graft-fighting Dane.
Right. I don't know if he was just idealistic or naive, but he tried to fight against all of the political corruption, which was completely entrenched in the West Park District at that time. And I guess he thought that he could kind of blow the whistle on this, and so they fired him in 1900. But he got very lucky because in 1905 there was a reform-minded governor who said, we need a guy who knows everything about parks and nothing about politics. And so they appointed him as the head of the entire park system.
Tell me what we're looking at now.
This is one of the original flower shows, and it's a little...
this is in the conservatory. And which room is this?
That's the show house. And right now, if you saw, you would look at the show house and then you could turn right and go into Hort Hall, but it was built in the 20s. And it's, you know, it's a little confusing because it looks so empty, but these flower shows, they probably took this picture before they really let the public get in there. Thousands of people would come and visit, tens of thousands, you know, over the course of a day. It was quite an attraction.
Jensen wanted the visitors to the park to be uplifted by what they experienced. And look at this woman looking at this great display. This looks pretty uplifting for anybody.
That's a beautiful photograph. In addition to Jens Jensen, he really was not a horticulturalist. And a couple of years later, they hired a man that they hired away from the Missouri Botanical Garden named August Koch. And he really, they called him the magician of flowers. And he propagated all different shades of flowers and different varieties of things that had never been done before. And so he created these exquisite flower shows.
Well, let's keep going through the pictures to see what else we have up here. Ah, this is
the fern room, and it still looks like that. It is so incredibly beautiful.
And this was considered revolutionary at the time because?
This one really sums up the idea of landscape art under glass, because before this, conservatories tend to clump a lot of plant materials in the middle of a room, and there were no views. Jensen, well, he wanted his building to emulate the shape of a Midwestern haystack.
Because he wanted to get away from that extravagant sort of pretentious, and so this is supposed to look like a Midwestern haystack.
Exactly. And then inside, he created those great views across the landscape with beautiful stonework. And there's a famous story about how he wasn't happy with the work that the stonemason had done because there's a waterfall in there. And so he told the stonemason to find someone who could play the piano for him so he could listen to Mendelssohn's Spring Song. And the sound of Mendelssohn's Spring Song would give him the inspiration for exactly the way that the water should flow over those rocks. And there's still, of course, the waterfall is still there. It's really a beautiful space.
Next time I go there, I'll think of Mendelssohn. Now, we have a picture about a competition involving marbles. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, part of the fascination for us, Joanne and I both were so taken with all of the different activities that have happened in this park over time. So this is in the 1950s, and they did a lot of championships and competitions in the park. But there was a golf course in the park at one time. There was a horse racing track in the park at one time. You know, fly casting. It was just so interesting, all of the different things that this park has been to so many people.
And recently, the conservatory has been the site of so many art displays. Was this part of what was envisioned from the beginning, or did this just evolve?
Well, the conservatory itself originally wasn't used for art displays, but Jensen was fascinated with the idea of that there should be appropriate kinds of art in the landscape, and so he did actually launch these outdoor art exhibitions. Had one in Garfield Park in 1909 where they had actually models of pieces that had been from the Columbian Exposition shown right there in Garfield Park. But so I guess there's a precedent for it.
Well, one of the big turnaround events in the minds of many for the conservatory was the Dale Chihuly exhibition. That was when, in 1990?
It was 2001.
2001.
Right.
And that was just eye-popping.
Oh, it was a wonderful, wonderful event. Not only was it so absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking, but it brought a lot of people back to the conservatory, and they were able to rediscover it. And our book includes historic photographs, but there are also new contemporary photographs by Brooke Collins, and she has the most magnificent photograph of the Chihuly exhibit that's in the book. Well,
thank you so much for coming. And there's
you.
more information about the other events pertaining to the 100th anniversary of the Garfield Park Conservatory, which we will have on our website. And again, the book is called Inspired by Nature, the Garfield Park Conservatory and Chicago's West Side. And if you want more information on it, just go to our website, WTTW.com, and click on Chicago Tonight. And a look at some early television history is up next, so stick around.